Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Walking Through the Book of Exodus. I'm your host, Ruel Barksdale, and today I'm excited because we're going to be looking at the fifth chapter of this phenomenal book. I'll give you a few moments. Get some paper, get some pencil, get some pen, call a friend, call an enemy, so we can talk about, so we can look at, so we can learn from this phenomenal book. We'll get started in a few minutes. And I think today will be a blessing to you, as it has been to me as we prepared to walk through the fifth chapter of the book of Exodus. Now, remember last week we saw that God had told Moses what he wanted Moses to do. And unlike Abraham, when God tells Abraham to leave fame, family, fortune, friends, as soon as God starts talking, the next verse says, and Abram left. God's been going back and forth with Moses for two chapters. Don't do that, people. Don't do that. If God has faith in you to accomplish something, he didn't look at your resume before he called you. Didn't look at your bank account. Didn't look at your pedigree. As a matter of fact, what could you or I put on our resume that would impress God? God does not call the qualified, he qualifies the called. It is through him we live, we move, and we have our being. It's a God thing. Moses, get over yourself. It's not about you. It's about God. And so in Exodus, turn with me to Exodus, the third chapter, verses 18 through 20, because this is going to be important. And if Moses had just remembered this chapter, things would have been a lot easier for him if he'd remembered this verse. Exodus, the third chapter, verses 18 through 20, God is speaking to Moses. And God says, the elders of Israel will listen to you. Then you and the elders are to go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless a mighty hand compels him. So I will stretch out my hand and strike the Egyptians with all of the wonders that I will perform among them. After that, oh, he'll let you go. So he has told Moses, see, God doesn't always do this. He's told Moses the process that's going to happen to get to the promise. He's going to let you go. But before he lets you go, Moses, this is what's going to happen. Miles Monroe says God often does not give us the process before he gives us the promise. Because if he gave us the process, we would be afraid to even look and to go after the promise. But in this case, Moses knows. I also, before we get into this fifth chapter, want to give you some background on who's this Pharaoh guy. Pharaoh, his power and his authority were supreme, and there was no governmental body to check his authority. The pharaohs were said to be children of the sun. They were friends of to the greatest gods of Egypt. The pharaoh was considered to be more than a man, and he considered himself to be a god. And the Egyptians also considered him to be a god. He wasn't no little man now. He wasn't anybody to play with. He was seen as being a god. All right, so now we have the commission. We know what God has told Moses to do. He's going to talk to the elders. They're going to go with him. He's going to talk to Aaron. He's going to go with him. And when you go before Pharaoh, that takes a boldness that a lot of people don't have. We're afraid to go to our manager. We're afraid to go to our supervisor. We're afraid to go to the governor, the mayor. Moses is being asked to go before Pharaoh. All right, let's go to the fifth chapter and see what happens here. After what? After God had told Moses what to do, afterward, Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and said, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel says. Now, let me pause for a second. This is the first time that the God of Israel has been used in this way. If you go back to Genesis, the 33rd chapter and the 20th verse, there's the phraseology, the God of Israel, but he's talking about a person. In this chapter right here, he's talking about a nation. He's talking about his chosen people. And this is the first time in the Bible where we see this phraseology referred to as God's chosen people of the Old Testament. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, said, let my people go. Understand that this is a bold statement because Pharaoh thinks they're his people. These are my slaves. These are the people that are building my cities. I own these people. But a God is that I don't know, that I don't worship, that I he's telling me to let his people. What? This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: let my people go. They're not your people, Pharaoh. They're my people. Let my people go, so that they may hold a festival to me, not to you, not to your gods, to me in the desert. Pharaoh said, who's the Lord, that I should obey him and let Israel go? The God of slaves is going to tell me, the one that's enslaving them, to let what? Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I should obey him and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and I will not let Israel go. Now remember, God's already told Moses what was going to happen. Then they said, the God of the Hebrews has met with us. Now let us take a 3-day journey into the desert to offer sacrifices to the Lord our God, or he may strike us with plagues or with the sword. This is a matter of life and death, Pharaoh. Please let us go. We have to be obedient to God. But the king of Egypt said, Moses and Aaron, why are you taking the people away from their labor? Look, if y'all got time for 3 days of playing in the desert, y'all got too much time on your hands. Obviously, I'm not working you hard enough. Why are you taking your people away from their labor? Get back to work. Then Pharaoh said, look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you are stopping them from working. You messing with my pride. Do you know who I am? I'm a God. Don't come talking to me about the God of some slaves gonna tell me what to do. You messing with my profitability. I'm making money. My cities are being built off of the slave labor that I'm enforcing on your people. You're messing with my political standing. What's it going to look like if you come to me making demands from some guy that nobody's ever heard of, and I acquiesce? You're messing with my pride, Moses. You're messing with my profitability, Moses. You're messing with my political standing, Moses. Those are 3 things that still get people messed up in the 21st century: pride, profitability, political standing. And oftentimes, even our leaders of the 21st century, when God wants to go left, they want to go right. Why? Because of pride, because of profitability, because of political standing. Then Pharaoh said, look, the people of the land are now numerous, and you're stopping them from working. That same day, Pharaoh gave his order to the slave drivers and the foremen in charge of the people. You are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Straw has a binding property that allows bricks to be stronger, to be more pliable, to be used in a more useful way. And the Egyptians would provide the Israelites with straw to make the bricks for them. You are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw, but require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They are lazy. That is why they are crying out. Have you in history ever seen a people that built another nation, that have been brutalized, that have been enslaved, that have worked from can't see to can't see, while others sat back and looked at them doing the work, drinking their iced tea and mint juleps, and then they call them lazy? The slave owners call the slave lazy. Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen the children of slaves being called lazy when they built a country? Have you ever seen that? Pharaoh has the unmitigated gall to call these slaves lazy. That same day, Pharaoh gave this order to the slave drivers. and foremen in charge of the people. You are no longer to supply the people with straw for making bricks. Let them go and gather their own straw, but require them to make the same number of bricks as before. Don't reduce the quota. They are lazy. That is why they are crying out. Let us go and sacrifice to our God. Make them work harder. Make the work harder for the men so that they keep working and pay no attention to the lies of Moses and Aaron talking about let my people go, talking about freedom, talking about reparations, talking about I want to the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness, talking about that foolishness. No, y'all are slaves. Get back to work. Then the slave drivers and the foreman went out and said to the people, this is what Pharaoh says, I will not give you any more straw. Go and get your own straw wherever you can find it, but your work will not be reduced at all. So the people scattered all over Egypt to gather stubble to use for straw. And now they didn't even know, Pharaoh didn't know what he was doing, because now the people are going all over Egypt and they're interacting with the Egyptians, and the Egyptians are seeing their plight, and some of them have pity. See, sometimes people don't fight against injustice because they don't see it. And one of the things, even in the 21st century, that we have to do is injustice has to have a flashlight. It has to be seen for it to be dealt with. And Pharaoh, in his foolishness, has allowed a flashlight to be put on what's happening to the children of Israel. They're why are you here? I'm trying to find straw. Straw for what? If I don't build so many bricks in a day, I'm beaten. So the people scattered all over Egypt to gather stubble to use for straw. The slave drivers kept pressing them, saying, complete the work required of you for each day, just as when you had straw. The Israelite foremen appointed by Pharaoh's slave drivers were beaten. The Israelites themselves that were made managers, that were made supervisors, that were put in charge of their fellow Israelites. They had to beat the Israelites. They had to beat their brothers and sisters, because if they didn't make the quota, they were beaten. And so what do you do when you're in the middle? When you know that you've been given responsibility, you've been given charge over people, and if they don't do what the management says to do what the government says to do, it's your responsibility to punish them. What do you do? How do you handle that? The Israelite foreman went and appealed to Pharaoh. Let me back up. The slave drivers kept pressing them, saying, complete the work required for you each day, just as when you had straw. The Israelite foremen appointed by Pharaoh's slave drivers were beaten and were asked, why didn't you meet your quota of bricks yesterday or today as before? Then the Israelite foreman went and appealed to Pharaoh. See, this is the problem. They didn't appeal to God. They didn't appeal to Moses or Aaron. They appealed to Pharaoh. Why are we going to the oppressor for freedom, for relief, when the oppressor has the oppression is never voluntarily stopped? And even I think today sometimes we go to the wrong source for relief. Your source is not the oppressor. Your source is God. Then the Israelite foreman went and appealed to Pharaoh. Why have you treated your servants this way? Your servants are given no straw, yet we are told make bricks. Your servants are being beaten, but the fault is not with the fault is with your own people. Pharaoh said, lazy. That is what you are, lazy. That is why you keep saying, let us go and sacrifice to the Lord. Now get to work. You will not be given any straw, yet you must produce your full quota of bricks. The Israelite foremen realized they were in trouble when they were told, you are not to reduce the number of bricks required of you each day. When they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. And they said, may the Lord look upon you and judge you. You have made us a stench to Pharaoh and his officials, and have put a sword in their hand to kill us. We were better off when we were just ordinary slaves, not looking to go out into to the desert to worship our God. We were better off. So Isabel Wilkerson talks about the moment of emancipation, and many people, many slaves, it was a hard moment. Do we stay on the plantation? Do we go north looking for freedom? The warmth of other suns. What do we do? Do we become indentured servants? Do we strike? What do we do? And God's children in this moment, pleading with Pharaoh, wondering if they should even pursue this just for 3 days. The Israelite foremen realized they were in trouble when they were told, you are not to reduce the number of bricks required of you for each day. When they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them. And they said, may the Lord look upon you and judge you. You have made us a stench to Pharaoh and his officials and have put a sword in their hand to kill us. The foremen are blaming Moses, and then what does Moses do? He blames God. Because he forget where we started the lesson, my brother, my sister. Exodus 3rd chapter, verses 18 through 20. God tells Moses exactly what's going to happen. Pharaoh's not going to listen to you until I show a mighty hand. And then he will let you go. God not only told him the end, he told him the process. But sometimes when we're in the midst of trouble, when we're in the midst of pain, we're in the midst of the storm, we lose sight of the promise that what God said, don't let the rain of today, don't let the storm of today, don't let the trouble of today make you forget what God told you, Moses. Moses returned to the Lord and said, O Lord, why have you brought trouble upon this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble upon this people, and you have not rescued your people. Well, you haven't done what you said you were going to do, Lord. The challenge of this 5th chapter is God is telling Pharaoh, let my people go. The challenge of the 21st century is God is telling his children, his people, will you let Pharaoh go? Will you let go of his ways? Will you let go of his lifestyle? Will you let go of his priorities? Will you let go of his walk? Will you follow me and not Pharaoh? In the next chapter, in the 6th chapter, God is going to answer Moses. See, it's not a problem. God is not intimidated by your questions. God is not intimidated by your doubt. And sometimes we have to go to God and talk to him. But God is strong enough, he's powerful enough, he's bad enough to give you an answer. So next week, 6th chapter, we're going to find an answer, Moses. And we're going to follow this walk from promise to promised land. So next week, tell a friend, tell an enemy about our walk through the book of Exodus. And maybe by the time next week is over, you and your enemy will be friends. I love you. God loves you more. See you next week. Bye-bye.